Hello and welcome to episode 426 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fan's weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and listeners, for over a decade now, we're saying, oh, this is the Dark Souls of this, or the Dark Souls of that, or maybe something that's fraught and dark and difficult is the Dark Souls of podcasts. This is not the Dark Souls of podcasts, but it is a podcast about Dark Souls. We played the first Dark Souls, a 2011 Xbox 360 and PS3 game that I think has become a modern classic. It accelerated an entire genre into being that has just grown in popularity with each new title. But we will talk about the past and present of Dark Souls a lot this episode with myself and four other panelists. Who are they? Let's talk about them. They are Ben Love.
Hi.
Castillo.
Hello.
Aleks Franiczek.
Hello.
And making a triumphant return after over a year away from podcasting, Dom Kim.
Oh.
So, Dom, Aleks, Gio, Ben, we played Dark Souls. And let's, before we get into the meat of the episode, let's talk about a little bit of our individual backgrounds with the Souls games. I'll go first. Mine's very, very easy, because I've mentioned it a couple times on recent podcasts. I had From Souls apprehension or From Souls anxiety for years and years and years. I did have a copy of Demon's Souls for the PS3. I played it for like 90 minutes in 2011 or something, and did not have a great time. I just found it hard and intimidating, and so I watched from the sidelines Souls get bigger and bigger and more popular, and decided to finally bite the bullet and try Demon's Souls again 2 years ago. Playing the PS5 remaster, and I loved it. And then last year for the podcast, it took me months to get the courage to start it, but we played Bloodborne for the podcast, and I loved that as well. So I was more and more amenable to trying a different Souls game for the podcast this year. We landed on Dark Souls 1, and surprise, surprise, I love this game as well. I was going to try and play it slowly over the course of June and July, and give myself like maybe 6 weeks to do it. I finished it in about half of that time. I beat the game a couple of weeks ago, including DLC and a lot of optional content. But we'll get into the meat and potatoes of that later. Let's have someone else talk about their Souls background, abridged version, please.
Yeah, so I can start. I First, got my first taste of Souls when I got my PS3 in 2012 after graduating high school, and I played Demon's Souls first, which I really loved, and then I got Dark Souls after that, and I actually bounced off of Dark Souls because there's just a few ways in which it's different than Demon's Souls, which we might talk about, were really hard for me to wrap my head around. And I think I also ended up going to the catacombs really early, which is a bad idea. But then I came back to it a few months later and fell in love with it. And I've played every Souls game since.
Right on. So, Gio, let's talk about your background with Souls, which might be similar to what you told me on the Bloodborne episodes last year.
Yeah. So, just to, I guess, recap, I started in 2018. I didn't have a PS3 until 2017. So I only started with Demon's Souls. I wanted to play Demon's Souls before the servers shut down, and then I played it, and that's when I fell in love with Souls. Then I went to Bloodborne, and I really enjoyed it. And then I went back to the PS3 to play Dark Souls, and that was my first time. And the servers are still up, I think, to this day, and it was fun. It was fun being invaded and doing invading as well. And then I moved on to Dark Souls 2 and 3, and then I played a bit of Sekiro, but I bounced from that game. I think it's too hard for me. And then I played a bit of Elden Ring as well. So I basically played all of them.
Awesome. Now, similar to you, Aleks, you also joined us for the Bloodborne episodes last year. How far back do you go with Dark Souls?
Yeah, so I was also a little intimidated by its difficulty reputation around the time that Demon's Souls came out and started getting some accolades and praise from fans and things like that. I really wasn't into difficult games back then. Things have certainly changed since then. but I did pick up Dark Souls just based on like reputation and the fact that I heard like not only was it like a difficult game with good action, but like the atmosphere is good and the story is good. So I was willing to give it a chance, and so I picked it up like a year or two after its release, and I really did enjoy kind of the vibes of the game, the atmosphere. I worked my way through the early challenges and was having a generally good time with it. But once I hit Sen's Fortress, that was tough, and I banged my head against it for a while, and then I just sort of fell off and gave up until a Dark Souls loving friend came over once and was just like, "What? You haven't beaten Dark Souls?" And so he picked up the controller and was like, did a couple things, made some progress, gave it to me, and like motivated me to push forward. And sure enough, I did it. I got to Anne Orlando, eventually beat Ornstein and Smau, and it's just been a Souls love fest ever since. I think I basically played a Souls game like every year since I ended up finishing Dark Souls, and really fell in love with the series.
I've been on that 1 a year pace since 2 years ago, so I have plenty of time before I get to Sekiro or Elden Ring.
Yeah, you don't have to go at a Zach pace.
No. I think Zach beat all 7 or so of them in about 4 months, which is I don't know. I didn't even play Yakuza at that pace when I got into those for the first time. But I mean, similar to you, I knew them definitely by reputation long before starting any of them. Like I think I even knew probably 10 years ago. Oh yeah, go up and not down at the beginning of Dark Souls 1 without really knowing what that meant. But Dom, I'm certain you go further back with these games than I do. What's your personal background with the From Souls series?
So I knew of Dark Souls for a while because I had just been watching videos on it for so long since it came out in 2011, but I lacked the hardware or the money really to buy it back then. So when I got my gaming PC or my gaming laptop in 2015, Dark Souls was one of the first titles I bought and played. And it was just immediate connection. I just enjoyed all the world building. I really enjoyed the ambiance of the game. I think that's what really kept me playing, even through like some of the really tough parts, like Sen's Fortress, as mentioned. And I beat Dark Souls 1 in like 2 weeks or so, and then I immediately hopped over to Dark Souls 2 because that was the new game at the time. And yeah, ever since then, I've pretty much played everything besides Bloodborne because I didn't have a PS4. So yeah, I've been a From fan for a long time, but a From player for a little bit shorter of a time.
Yeah, Demon Souls and Bloodborne are still in Sony jail, which is increasingly curious. But before we get into Dark Souls 1 a little bit, I think that is worth talking about. From Souls has had this meteoric rise in the esteem of the world as a game developer, probably since Demon Souls, which was 2009. Hidetaka Miyazaki, who is the director of every single one of those From Souls games other than Dark Souls 2, where there was sort of a bit of a From Souls B team working on that. He, like all of these dark fantasy RPGs since then, have just raised the profile of From Software in a major way, culminating in Elden Ring. I think when right before Shadow of the Erdtree came out, they announced that Elden Ring had sold it was 22 or 23 million copies, which is which is like Monster Hunter World numbers. So now they are like they started out as sort of a mercenary studio publishing games for Sony or Bandai Namco or whomever, but now they are, I think, a major boutique RPG studio who have whose fans are as many and as rabid as they've ever been. I mean, we're in the middle of their sort of release window for the Elden Ring DLC, but when they announce their next big game, it's gonna shut some news sites down. And Dark Souls is inarguably one of their sort of big contributors to this rise because, I mean, it is extremely similar to Demon Souls, but they couldn't reuse the Demon Souls name because of different holding rights by Sony. they for whatever reason they decided not to publish with Sony. They published with Bandai Namco instead. Dark Souls is extremely similar to Demon Souls in execution and I mean for many reasons, both mechanical and stylistic. But the big change is that while Demon Souls has sort of like 5 disparate zones that you explore, almost like going into paintings in Super Mario 64. Dark Souls is a contiguous single setting. And I think one of the most impressive things about Dark Souls is that it is the interconnectedness of the world. And we'll just jump into it. Dark Souls opens with a big cutscene that sort of sets the stage of some of the mythology and origin of the world. How there was a large war between 4 lords and an army of dragons. This is oversimplifying it, so don't come at me in the comments. And sort of an age of gods was established after the defeat of the dragons. But that war was centuries and centuries earlier, and this world, which is called Lordran, is sort of it's somewhat crumbling. It is a suffering world that needs that needs some kind of new light or rescuing. And as you explore through the game, it's there's very very little explicit storytelling, like cutscenes with heavy dialogue, but you can sort of discover why the world is the way it is if you are very, very observant and collect a lot of items and read the item descriptions and make some mental connections. We are not going to be a podcast or YouTube series that there's people that have devoted their entire content creation careers to breaking down the lore in From Souls games. But one super impressive thing about Dark Souls is how contiguous the world is, and how the world building and the lore is present but hidden and more rewarding the more you look into it. And when I started the game, like the very first thing I noticed was like, oh, okay, this is this. I finished the opening area and now I'm in the Firelink Shrine, and oh, you can just sort of do whatever you want. And oh, okay, I fell off a cliff and died. Like it's very harsh and very brutal, but the game is communicating everything that it can to you, with maybe a few exceptions, very clearly. It's almost the epitome of tough but fair. And so, yeah, that's what jumps out at me, like the lore, the difficulty, the interconnected world, and how all of them are sort of parts of a greater whole. But that's already pretty big picture. What were everyone's first impressions of Dark Souls, at least to your memory, playing it several years ago?
For me, I think what struck me is how similar it was to Demon Souls. I was kind of expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but I think it kind of struck me how this is basically Demon Souls 2, with a bit of changes to how movement feels. I think is one, and obviously it's a different IP and the lore is different, and I think yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, that was my immediate thought when I started the game. I was like, oh, this is Demon Souls 2.
Yeah, it's a new setting, but the controls feel very similar. The stats are very similar. The way you build your character is very similar. The fact that souls are things you collect from items and defeated enemies, and they're everything from your experience points to your currency for buying items and abilities, to sort of everything revolves around souls. To the I think of it as a Diablo thing, but it's probably many games where when you die, you lose all your souls. But if you find the spot where you died, which is either your corpse or your bloodstain, depending on the game, you can regain all the souls back, and balances the risk reward of exploring further versus hanging back and trying to cash in your souls so you don't lose them. All of that is exactly the same, or very close to the same, between Demon Souls and Dark Souls, but the setting is different. And I think this is a new approach to a fully connected world, where it's just, there are sort of 5 doors that lead to 5 settings in Demon Souls.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Gio, because when I first played Dark Souls, my first impression is that it was pretty different from Demon Souls in a lot of ways I didn't like. Like I found the more open, interconnected world where you can go a lot of different ways at the beginning really frustrating because I went to some places that you're really not intended to go right away. And I like the more straightforward progression that you get from the Archstones and Demon Souls. But I think that, going back to it, that part of it kind of grew on me. And I've also, since getting really into Demon Souls and Dark Souls, went back and played the Kingsfield games, which were the first games that From Software made, and that Demon Souls is kind of a spiritual successor to. And really, like that interconnected like world design is very much taken from those Kingsfield games, especially Kingsfield 3 and then Kingsfield 4.
The key difference being that the Souls games are actually fun. I tried a Kingsfield game once many years ago, and I bounced off it so fast I don't remember which Kingsfield game it was.
Yeah, I'm a big Kingsfield fan, but yeah, they have that same, especially Kingsfield 4, the ancient city that's on the PS2, has that very interconnected, layered world design. But I think Dark Souls really nailed making that kind of design much more approachable, and also just in a format that I think is a little more accessible to most players than Kingsfield is. But it's interesting. They kind of brought that idea back forward, and then they've kind of abandoned it. They never really did that that connected, layered world design again with the series. So it kind of makes Dark Souls still unique in that way.
Okay, and this is a minor tangent, but I'm trying to remember what was the Kingsfield game that I hated many years ago. It was for the PS2, but I don't think it was Kingsfield 4. I think it was Shadow Tower Abyss.
Oh,
was
yeah.
was the game I tried like 20 years ago and hated. But I didn't even. It was so far away from the Souls games. I didn't even make that connection until we were probably several Souls releases in. So like Shadow Tower Abyss did not poison me against Souls. It was entirely my own my own mental issues preventing me from getting into Souls earlier. But yeah, I don't like Shadow Tower Abyss. Don't expect a retro encounter episode on that one.
Yeah, and they do, in all fairness, they do play very differently, but there is that seed of that idea in those games, which I think Dark Souls kind of went back to that well a little bit and made it more modern.
So Ben, you wouldn't say that Elden Ring is like kind of an evolution of Dark Souls concept of like a world where you can go anywhere? Or...
it is, but I think the open world format is a lot different from the more interconnected, but still very, I don't really want to say linear necessarily, but still like very curated experience that you get in Dark Souls. So you still have that obviously in Elden Ring, but it's just way more vast open spaces that, and then a lot of like repeated content that you would see in a lot of other open world games. Elden Ring does a lot of that as well. And whereas in Dark Souls, almost everything that you see is going to be a unique and different area, even though they're connected to each other.
Maybe we'll talk about this more in the second episode, but Dark Souls is sort of segmented. Like once you sort of get on a path somewhere, you're in that part of the world, and you can't necessarily see the next one over and easily go wherever you want to walk. Like it's like an ant farm where everything is connected, but it's mostly connected by semi-linear tunnels. Where Elden Ring is really just like an open sandbox where you can go in almost any direction you want. I've heard that Dark Souls 2 has more similarities to Elden Ring than 1 or 3 does in terms of world structure, especially with how Elden Ring treats its underworld. But yeah, that is forum chatter and not real experience on my part.
It's more like Dark Souls 2 has like a hub and like a wheel and spoke kind of design to how the levels are laid out. So it is a little bit more like what you're talking about, Sollosi, and maybe a little bit closer to Elden Ring in that way, but still pretty different.
Yeah, because Dark Souls 2, like Elden Ring, is like it's more like flat, I guess.
Yes,
Like if you're thinking
yes.
of like the paths you can go from Majula, like it's flat in the way that like Elden Ring's map is also flat, but obviously just like, not nearly as big. So I can definitely see some influence from Dark Souls 2 to Elden Ring.
Yeah, the verticality of Dark Souls' map is pretty impressive.
That's
because
the thing, yeah.
Now this is oversimplifying things a little bit. I would say that like three of the early paths that you can take are the Undead Burg to the Undead Parish, and then maybe the depths to Blighttown. And again, I know it's more complicated than this, but basically, if you leave the Firelink Shrine out the main path through the Undead Burg, you're basically going on a like wide spiral staircase where you end up directly above of your starting location. And once you get to the church in the Undead Parish, you can take an elevator straight down back to the starting point, and that's kind of impressive. Like, oh man, I didn't realize I was vaguely going up and to the left, but I didn't realize I would end up above this Firelink Shrine. And by that same token, when you're able to get into the depths and then the sewer area and then Blighttown, you're going down, 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 down. But eventually, towards the end of Blighttown, you find a series of elevators up that takes you again right back to the starting point. But it's different from like a Metroidvania game, because a 2D Metroidvania game, which is a genre that I adore, you can sort of see how everything's connected by going to the mini map and saying, oh, this goes here and this goes here, and I can maybe eventually find an item that'll let me go here, or a key that lets me get back to the starting point. Every time you find a path that takes you to a more accessible part of the game, and a lot of the time it's getting deep enough into one area, they're able to unlock a door that was like maybe a one-way key that takes you to a tunnel or an elevator back to an easier area. Every time that happens in Dark Souls, it's almost a fun surprise. Like, oh, this leads all the way back here, and oh, this leads all the way back here. And when you're dozens of hours in, and you have a feel for the world, you'll be like, all right, time to go. Now I'm going to the New Londo ruins, but I got to go through this part of the Valley of the Drakes. And I go through this tunnel, but not that tunnel, to get back to the basin through the woods. If I want to go and find Andre the blacksmith, like it is interconnected in a way that's always sort of fun and surprising. And also, they don't really give you much in the way of a mini map or a quest log, or things that we think of as maybe modern conveniences of open world games, or if you want to be a little bit pointed, like a Ubisoft open world game. This is not a modern Assassin's Creed game that gives you a map full of icons. This is just an interconnected map that you have to discover it and master it yourself. But Dom, you've been a little quiet. Like when you watched videos of Dark Souls for quite a bit before playing it for the first time. Was playing it for the first time, like did that experience? Do you still have the same feeling of discovery of how the world was so connected?
Oh yeah, like I picked the game up like I stopped watching videos on it around 2012, and I picked the game up at like 2015. So I didn't remember most of it. So it was definitely like really surprising, and like honestly, it's still like a gaming core memory. Like at the Undead Parish, when you take the elevator and it goes down, and you're like, oh my god, I'm back at Firelink. And then also in the Undead Burg, when you finally survive the Drake on the bridge, and you go down and you kick the ladder and you see the bonfire below. I was like, wow, that was like actually such a actual like mind blowing moment for me in gaming. It was like I think honestly those two moments really just had me completely sold on the game. Just with how From Software were designing the levels, and I was really just looking forward to seeing how else they were going to like use this sort of really smart vertical design for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
it's like
this is skipping ahead a little bit, but one of the last areas I explored in the game was the Tomb of Giants, and eventually the Tomb of Giants brings you to like this open cliff area, and looking off in the cliff, you could see the giant tree roots that lead back to the Ash Lake, which is one of the deepest parts of the game. So like this game's verticality and interconnectivity like keeps referencing itself and surprising the player through, at least for me, through basically the whole playtime. And the only areas that are truly separated chunks are the very first area of the game, the Undead Asylum, and the very last area of the game, the Kiln of the First Flame. But we're throwing around a lot of words. If you haven't played Dark Souls, this sounds truly like you missed the first lecture of a very important class. But basically, I don't want to get too deep into the lore now. But in this world, all humans are basically have the potential to be undead. Like if you are if you die in Lordran, you return to the last fire you visited as an undead, and by collecting souls and defeating monsters, you can regain humanity by through your own merit, through your own accomplishments. But and then this is in the story and not in gameplay. If a human undead loses their sense of self or gives in to despair or loses their purpose, it's not quite clear to me. Maybe you can correct me if I'm off here. Then you might become hollowed, in which case you become one of the feral undead that is an adversary of the region. But you are a quote unquote chosen undead who are visiting Lordran for unclear reasons, but you want to you're exploring the region to possibly save it or possibly find your fortune there, and you're guided by the other NPCs who are mostly fellow undead that are in various stages of grieving or suffering or struggling. But it's not all a complete downer. Like there's you meet some people like Solaire, who is a visiting knight from another kingdom who is trying to who is from an order of knights that worships the sun, and because the sun god Gwyn was one of the ancient heroes of Lordran, he's either searching for Gwyn or searching for Gwyn's ancient flame that might save his own kingdom. And then you have I think his name is Siegmeyer, the a venturing knight from another kingdom who keeps stumbling into difficult situations that you, the player, keeps saving him from. You first meet him, I think he's outside Sen's fortress trying to figure out a way to get in, and then you see him again in Sen's fortress, and then in Anor Londo, and then in Blighttown. So this is not a game totally devoid of story, but most of it is you as a solo undead struggling through a world. But the way that a lot of From Software games work is that you're not really, at least by player choice, you're not really playing alone. This is a multiplayer game of sorts. If you decide to play online, then you're able to summon others into your world to help you, or invade the worlds of others to fight people. And there are gameplay systems that encourage one or the other or both. Like if you join Solaire's Order of Knights, it makes it gives you more bonuses for helping others. If you join the Hunters, what's the name of the organization run by that cat in the woods area?
The Forest Hunter.
Yeah. If you join the Forest Hunters conclave, then you get more bonuses for defeating other players in PvP. So this is an online game. I played 80% of it offline because I was just trying to figure it out on my own, and I was deathly afraid of the ways it could go badly if someone invaded my game. But this can be a pretty intense multiplayer experience, or a positive co-op multiplayer experience. Do any of you guys have some interesting multiplayer memories of Dark Souls, either recently or in the past?
I don't know. Mine is interesting. I just keep getting owned every time. Someone keeps killing me every time I go human. This Japanese player keeps coming. It's the exact same one. Well, this happened to me in 2021 and on PS3, and he kept invading me for some reason, and I kept dying. So that's a core memory of mine when it comes to Dark Souls, getting owned.
I just have the worst memories of griefing players in Diablo 2 in like 2004, 2005, and I didn't want to recreate that for these games. So I've played Bloodborne and Demon Souls and Dark Souls offline for the most part.
I think that is the smarter way to play, because I remember playing through Dark Souls 1 the first time. I kept on getting invaded by players running there was a meta PvP build called Giant Dad, where you kind of just leverage all the best armor pieces and have like a I think it was like mathematically the best weapon in the game. And they just invade players and they just like face roll them. And it was, I'll be honest, like getting invaded sucked. I did not really enjoy that, but I also understand that's just like part of the game. And I always just play Hollow because of not wanting to deal with that.
I remember reading about that when I was looking at for what end game armors to use. People were complaining about the Giant Dad nerf. I think it's using the Giant's armor set, but with the Mask of the Father, which increases your carrying capacity, and plus some rings that also increase carrying capacity, and that lets you use basically the heaviest armor and weapons possible while still maintaining a fast walk and roll speed, and it's extremely difficult to kill unless you're someone with a similar poise and stability stat. And listeners, if you're not familiar with Souls parlance, like poise and stability are how easy you are to be knocked out of your attack versus how well you can block enemy attacks. And sometimes when you're a knight fighting another knight, it comes down to who's able to like sort of out shield muscle the other one, like you're like a phalanx of Spartans or something, but not the phalanx from Demon Souls. But speaking of heavy armor and everything, one other thing about these Souls games is it's very individualistic how you build your character. There are, I think, 7 or 8 core stats, many of which can all of which affect the game in an important way, but many of which can sort of contribute to what weapons and what spells and what armor you can equip or main with. I went with a very, very basic build that was similar to how I handled Bloodborne last year. I put points basically equally into vitality, stamina, dexterity, and strength, so I could just keep equipping a large variety of weapons and armor. And when I eventually found ones that I liked, I sort of stuck to those and focused on those stats more. And because I really, really liked the Great Scythe, once I got that, I ended up focusing on dexterity and stamina more than strength and vitality. But by the end of the game, I had some pretty good medium heavy armor, a Great Scythe, and then either a light shield or a great shield, whether I wanted to try and face tank things or parry things properly. But I almost never used spells. I almost never used bow and arrows, except for a couple specific enemies. I was basically just a heavy knight with a giant scythe for the last half of the game, at least. But how did any of you have an interesting way of building your character for your most recent playthrough?
I went pure dex this time around, and I went for the Uchiga Tana. Like, so I maxed it plus 15, and then I'm basically just a ninja. I'm like role playing as a ninja. So I have like the shadow garb on, and
do you use the cat ring?
Yeah. Not. I don't have it for some reason. I don't know where to find it. So I'm just on the Chloranthy ring, and the well, it depends. Like, I change rings whenever I need to. I don't want to put on the FAP ring because it's too limiting.
Ring of Favor and Protection, which is a good ring that boosts your health and carrying capacity. But if you were ever remove it, it's destroyed, and it sort of locks you into that ring for the most part if you decide to use it. I did use the Ring of Favor and Protection for most of the second half of the game after I got it, because I was always trying to wear the heaviest armor I could without getting too slow.
Mm-hmm.
I used the Elite Knight armor for a long portion of the game, and then eventually settled on Black Iron armor instead. Havel's armor was too heavy. The Giant armor was too heavy. It was like, no, I'm gonna go with Black Iron because there's a lot of cool knights that look like this.
Yeah, I just went with I just kind of recreated my first playthrough, which is just the Elite Knight armor, and then the Eagle Shield with the halberd. And then later on, I would get the Baldur's Straight Sword, and it was like just a well-rounded build. And I played like I played like how I did my first playthrough as well, just turtling behind the shield and then just getting pokes in with the halberd, which does a lot of damage, surprisingly. Like when you see the scaling on the halberds, it kind of doesn't look that amazing, but the base stats are really high, and like when you upgrade it, it also gets pretty nice damage boosts. So yeah, I was just pretty much turtling behind a shield and poking things.
I would again, I used the scythe most in the second half of the game. I used the claymore a bit before that, but I would two-hand the scythe when I was around a lot of small enemies, but when I was in a new area or fighting a boss that was a little scary, I did a lot of shield turtling. And if you can get a shield that has 100% damage reduction, which is several of them, and high stability, which affects how much stamina you lose when you block, you can take care of yourself pretty well the whole game. Like it's a very defensive play style is extremely fair, at least through the game. Maybe in PvP it's different, but again, it depends on where I was in the game and how comfortable I was in a specific area. But sometimes I would two-hand my scythe. Sometimes I would just like have my great shield up at all times, which was the wooden great shield for a while. Then eventually a tower shield. And for like the last two fights of the game, I did forge the great shield of Artorias, and that thing is amazing. But yeah, does anyone else have an unusual play style? Like, I mean, all of us are kind of are kind of heavily armored knights here. Did anyone do like a faith or intelligence based spell build?
I usually do a faith build when I play. This time I didn't because I got a Black Knight sword drop, so I just went strength two hand with the grass crest on my back.
I got a Black Knight great sword dropped from like the undead purg, but I was so focused on increasing my stamina, there was no way I could get to a strength level to wield it anytime soon. It was like the first Black Knight of the game basically gave me a Black Knight great sword.
Yeah, but the faith build is actually very strong because lightning spear is just a really good miracle, or I think they're called miracles, right? And like a really good offensive spell. So I have played quite a few faith builds, and it's a fun way to play. That's a big difference too compared to demons. As demons, there was basically no offensive faith magic, so they added the lightning spear in Dark Souls, and it's quite good.
I did do a faith build in Demon Souls when I played it because I got a blessed mace pretty early. So you can get regular weapons in Demon Souls that scale with faith, but there's no like you said, there's no offensive spells with faith. So I was basically like a self-healing paladin when I played Demon Souls a couple of years ago. Blessed Mirdan Hammer was the goat in that game. But yeah, like there's even three schools of magic. There's miracles based on your faith stat, sorceries based on your intelligence or intellect stat, and then pyromancy, which are spells that don't deal damage based on the specific stat, but you do need some points into your attunement in order to equip them at all.
And they deal damage off your upgrading the glove,
right? Yeah your catalyst, which is your glove / magic wand basically. So like it's very, very viable to have like a magic based build in Dark Souls, but maybe because of my more recent Souls experience, I kind of just wanted to be a lone knight storming these castles and other areas.
Yeah. One of the things I think Dark Souls 1 did really well that the later games really lack is for magic builds at least, you can kind of just get by with just having a nice upgraded staff and maybe just like a one damage ring and then just fighting good spells along the way. But yeah, in like the later games, you really kind of have to like stack a lot of like spell damage buffing or like magic damage buffing rings, and then like spell casting rings, and like it kind of becomes the game becomes balanced around you having all of those things equipped at the same time, which becomes a chore. But I feel in Dark Souls 1, they really just kind of just let the things be and just have the rings be individually powerful. And so you aren't really like confined to having like those gear slots taken up, which really felt nice, if I'm being honest, compared to the later games.
Now, I've not played Elden Ring or Dark Souls 3, but and this is maybe speculation on my part. Do you think that those games were influenced by just how available information is on the games now? Because like it's very easy to go into Elden Ring and optimize yourself by looking up where to find everything you need, where they sort of deliberately obfuscate some of what the stats and items do in these earlier games. Do you think Elden Ring is maybe designed with players doing research and optimizing?
I would think it does play some part into it, but I feel, um, I mean, for sure. And even I think Miyazaki even came out a couple of weeks ago or like last month saying that he kind of expects players to be using guides when playing the game, and like he thinks that's like a perfectly valid play style as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they designed or balanced the game around players just having the internet at their disposal.
Oh, I absolutely played all of these with the internet at my disposal. Like I basically went in intending to discover and explore on my own. But if I ever wanted to know something or wanted to find something, I would look it up and just get it. Which again, but part of my personality is if I don't know something or feel like I want to know something, I immediately do all the research I can to become an expert about it and then fake it on a podcast. So I appreciate that Miyazaki acknowledges that play style and isn't a jerk on Reddit saying that you're playing the game wrong.
Yeah, I think too that like the build complexity in the as the games progress, like as there's been more Souls games, the build complexity is ramped up a lot, and I think that part of that too is like they've made a lot of changes. So now like pretty much every like here you have pyromancies and you don't really need to dump into any stats to use pyromancies, but they pretty much changed that where any type of magic now requires at least one stat, and some types of magic require maybe two different stats. So it's just like the way that they design the game and the way that they want players to build, and how many stats they've added and how many of those stats are damage stats, and how you need a certain amount in one stat or another and you have to balance them all. That just wasn't as much of a thing, I think, and when they were designing this game, and it's so much more of a thing now. And so the games kind of cater to that in a way that the Dark Souls just doesn't, because I don't think that community around making builds and everything, I think really arose out of this game, and so it wasn't something they were thinking of when they made it.
Oh yeah, there were game facts guides and whatnot, but it isn't. It did not have the reach and popularity that Elden Ring does now. So I basically agree. Like there's so much more information now that people will gravitate towards optimization. And my comment earlier was like, do you think Elden Ring was designed with players self-optimizing in mind more than Dark Souls 1 was, which is I don't know how true that is, but I mean, those games certainly feel different. But you know what? We've been talking about Dark Souls for 40 minutes and haven't mentioned like a single boss, a single enemy, a single really bit of story, other than like maybe a couple characters. And I think I mentioned going up or going down. From your starting area in the Undead Burg, you defeat one boss and then get picked up by a giant raven and dumped into the Firelink Shrine, the true sort of main starting point of the game. If you go sort of out the Firelink Shrine into the town area, that takes you to the Undead Burg. From the Undead Burg, there's a couple ways to go down, but you need keys to get there. Maybe if you use a master key from the very beginning of the game, you can get there earlier. But also from that starting Firelink area, you can take a giant elevator down to the place called the New Londo Ruins, and from there get to a bunch of more challenging areas far earlier than the game probably intends you to go. Like there's like the New Londo Ruins are kind of just an interconnected area for like one dungeon and other elevators going down. There's a place called the Valley of the Drakes that's just a bunch of narrow cliffs that connect a couple of different areas. Is it just me, or does this game have too many cliffs? Because even just walking like along the Undead Burg or walking towards the elevator down in the Firelink Shrine, it's way too easy to just take a wrong step off and die. Like for some reason, this entire game takes place on cliff faces in a way that I didn't always love.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is when you're in Undead Burg, where you're under the aqueduct, and you have to go. There's like the pole or the pillar, right? And you have to go around the pillar on this little bitty strip of like it's not even walkway, like just a little bitty part of like the aqueduct that you have to go to then get into that gate. That's where the sewers are or whatever. and like there's also like enemies there. So I can imagine like most people fall off into the pit there because it's just so, it doesn't even look like you can walk on it from just watching it, from looking at it. So there's a lot of sections like that. Yeah.
Is that the one with the shielded enemy, the shielded spear enemy? I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's a joke of an encounter. If I'm being honest, I've died so many times.
Yeah, and like when you're walking along it, like your character's like they'll be standing, but like one of their legs is just like out in the gap. It's like so narrow.
Yeah. And then the real kicker is, in order to get past the enemy, you have to kick his shield to stagger him. And then the kick is such a finicky, like it requires you to use the movement stick to kick. And like while you're teeter-tottering on this edge, you also have to like flick your stick in order to kick. So it's like it's a real tight corner you have to navigate.
There are so many tight corners like that. Like I mean, the area of Blighttown, which is sort of like the like the end of the first third of the game, is a lot of it is just going down into a poison swamp on these sort of rickety looking wooden platforms and ladders, and it's so easy to just fall out and then land in the poison swamp and die, or or having one of those giants sort of, like, even if you successfully block an attack, you get pushed far enough back that you fall off. That like fall damage and keeping your balance and making sure not to get too close to the edge is a major part of the game. The second or third boss of the game are these belfry gargoyles at the top of the church in the undead parish. And I feel so stupid. I got to that church, I defeated a rare knight that was there, and I was looking for a place to save or get back. I accidentally didn't see the elevator down. I didn't see the path back to the blacksmith, which is sort of the back door of that area. And I got killed by 3 Balder Knights that I accidentally all aggroed at once when I was looking for a way out. And I lost, like, oh man, that was very early in the game, but I lost like 12,000 souls, and it felt like I had just lost a month of my life. And when I wasn't even close to that. But like stories like that, like losing all your souls from silly fall or a reckless bit of gameplay, is extremely From Souls. And I had plenty of moments like that. But I mentioned those gargoyles, like that's one fight where you can easily fall off the edge, and that's a part of one hazard of gameplay. Let's say from the first half of the game, what's a boss encounter or a rare enemy encounter that you found particularly memorable? I have one in mind, but maybe one of you has the same one, so I'll let someone else go first.
The Capra Demon.
Got him.
No.
Which is a crazy early boss fight where they basically...
It wouldn't be that bad.
It's the arena.
Except you're fighting him in basically a coffin.
Yeah. So they put you go through this, it's like there's a doorway, like a small archway, and then the Capra Demon is at the end of this alley. And then he has 2 dogs also. And then on your left there's like a stairway going up. So what you're supposed to do is run as fast as you can, make the corner as fast as you can, and run up the stairs so you can take the dogs one at a time and then fight the Capra Demon. But he also has like a leaping attack with his 2 giant machetes, so he can also just like leap straight at you and then bring them down on you and just kill you in one hit. It's very frustrating.
I had the somewhat less sensible strategy of just sprinting at the dogs with my claymore and trying to do a running R2 to kill them in like one combo, and then try to 1v1 the Capra Demon. And for several times that ended in failure because I got macheted by the Capra Demon before I could regroup, basically. But eventually I got there. It's just the combination of the tiny arena, the extra enemies, and the Capra Demon being this, a goat wielding 2 giant machetes was a step up from difficulty from the Taurus Demon with its hammer, or the 2 gargoyles with their halberds. Oh, Dom, did you use a regular? Excuse me, Dom, did you use a regular halberd or one of the gargoyle halberds in this one?
I just used the regular one that you find in front of the church.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think on the flip side, I think um, one of the enemy counters that really sticks out to me is like the first Black Knight that you encounter in the Undead Burg, like when like he's kind of like tucked away in like one of the tunnels
Yeah, no,
underneath
he's
the main
guarding a
path.
ring, and I
Yeah.
attempted to kill him like 4 or 5 times before I got there. Probably, actually, you know what? My memory is probably being gentle. It was probably more than 10 times. But that was basically the encounter that taught me how to parry because I wanted that damn ring. So
Yeah.
I mastered doing the first half of the Undead Burg to get to that knight, then grabbing my bloodstain from where he killed me last and luring him into an open area where I could circle him and then that was the encounter that taught me how to parry and backstab.
hmm
Then I got
Yeah, like
much better at it with Silver Knights and in Orlando.
for sure. Yeah, but yeah, like that was just like I think that was like the encounter that made me like really just like curious about like the world building. I'm like, why are they sticking like such an obviously extremely over leveled enemy here? And like like what like and like he doesn't fit really the aesthetic of the Undead Burg at all. Like the Undead Burg is just like a bunch of like skeletons, and here's this massive hulking like Black Knight wielding a massive sword as well. Like what? Like why is he here? And that's sort of like those sort of moments I feel really help flesh out the world, or at least make the player curious enough to like wonder about it.
For the Xenoblade fans out there, that Black Knight is the territorial Rotbart of Dark Souls.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Dom. Like you kind of see these Black Knights like in different zones, like throughout the game.
Mhm.
Like if you go back to Undead Asylum, like there's like a whole bunch of them,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. Like if you like think of like the why are they there? Like what are the lore implications of that?
I mean, I think the lore implications is that they're sort of the personal guard or the elite knights of one of the sort of rulers of the land. I know it's more complicated than that, but when you do go back to the Undead Asylum, it's so convoluted. You have to like go to the top of Firelink Shrine, like roll off this one corner to get to the raven nest of the raven that took you there, and then like curl up into an egg shape and have it carry you back. Um, I only know about this because I was looking for materials to upgrade my weapons, and then a Titanite slab, which is an item that you need to level up something to 15. Like the going back to the Undead Asylum is one of the very few ways to get a Titanite slab. So I wouldn't have even known about this except when I was looking online to how to upgrade my my weapons. But when you go back there, you fight a harder version of the Asylum Demon from the very beginning of the game, but also the knight that gave you a key to escape the asylum comes back as a Black Knight in that area. So I mean, it's just good. The world building of this game is so crazy. You're always seeing like hearing about someone or meet someone and then you fight them as an enemy later because they give in to despair or become hollow or something happens to them, that it just like right when you get attached to a part of the world, you run into the way that that part of the world betrays you. And it's there's a lot of suffering in the world of Dark Souls. No one's really having a good time and thriving, but the more you explore and the more you research and the more you discover, the better and more complete it feels. Like I mean, I wouldn't say there are very many great characters with a lot of dialogue or depth, but I love Solaire and Andre so much just because they were there for me when I needed them. I got weirdly attached to parts of the world, but sort of at the outset, if you go sort of out and then up, that takes you from Undead Burg to Undead Parish, and then a church. And if you beat the gargoyles on top of the church, you get to ring a bell. And then if you use the keys you find in that part of the world to unlock some doors in the Undead Burg, that takes you to an area called the Depths, which leads you to that Capra Demon we mentioned, a sewer area underneath the Undead Burg, and then a path to a new zone called Blight Town, which we've referenced a couple times. Blight Town was like it looked like a system of shanties because it's sort of wooden buildings on stilts descending down into a poison swamp. So it looks like that they were it was a vertically built city that was maybe thriving at our community that was thriving at some point or another, but then it became polluted or poisoned to a vast degree. The boss at the end of that is a Quelaag, a giant fire spider woman. But if you get to the end of Blighttown and defeat Quelaag, there's a second bell there. And if you ring that bell, then a giant gatekeeper notices the second bell that you ring. I think you can ring them in either order, but the game nudges you into doing the church and then Blighttown. The giant gatekeeper pulls a giant chain and unlocks a gate that's near the undead parish's church to an area called Sen's Fortress. And if you go through Sen's Fortress, which is full of traps and very difficult, like I really struggled through Sen's Fortress because like every time I figured out how to get past one of the Snake Men guards in one area, I would get hit by a boulder dropping down through the path of the next area. And it's really sort of a slightly puzzle dungeon of figuring out where the arrows are going to come out of the wall, where the spikes are going to come out of the wall, when a giant boulder is going to fall down, and knowing in advance where to avoid them. It was a little bit Indiana Jones, but not always in a fun way. Sen's Fortress, but at the end of Sen's Fortress, you fight a giant iron golem, and then if you defeat that thing, then it opens up a path to Anor Londo, which is a sort of castle city that is the home of the gods of Lordran. And that's, I think, sort of the midpoint of the game. Like the Dark Souls is basically get to Firelink Shrine, ring 2 bells, go through the fortress, and then Anor Londo is the midpoint. Is kind of the very, very vague bullet points of what Dark Souls 1 is. But there are so many other paths to explore off there. Like, is there an area of the game that we haven't talked about yet, or maybe a new? Should we just go right into Sen's Fortress and Anor Londo? But is there a place or a thing that we want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Don't worry. I mean, there's also the catacombs, which are right next to Firelink Shrine.
That's right. They are full of skeletons. And,
yes. And you can't kill skeletons without a blessed or like a faith-based weapon, basically. So they'll just keep respawning.
Well, yes and no. I think what happens is there's skeletons, and then there's also necromancer enemies.
Yes, if you can kill the necromancer, and then they will stop.
And necromancers are unique enemies like the Black Knights, where once you kill them once, they won't respawn even if you go back to the Firelink Shrine, heal, and come back. So you can make your way through the catacombs by killing the necromancers, which will make the skeletons much more manageable, but it's much, much better with a blessed weapon, especially since, I mean, if you go to the catacombs before the depths or before the Berg, you're going to get killed because those skeletons are tuned for the mid game for sure.
Yeah, and the first necromancers are like pretty far into the catacombs, so you have to go like quite a distance before you'd actually be able to take out the skeletons. Yeah.
And the other I mean, I don't want to say it's a dirty secret because all of us know it for sure, but one unfortunate thing about this game is well, I mean, first of all, bonfires are sort of your save points and your safety points where you can heal and it restores your charges of your healing flask. But bonfires are an important thing, but there's no fast travel between bonfires until after the midpoint of the game. So perhaps famously in the catacombs, but a couple other places this is also true. If you go deep into the catacombs, find bonfires, you might be stuck at those bonfires because sometimes getting back to safety of the Firelink Shrine is way harder than pressing into the catacombs. And I experienced that a little bit with the second catacombs bonfire, because I went there. I defeated the first boss down there. What was his name?
Pinwheel.
Pinwheel, the mask guy. I didn't get the good mask. I was given the mask of the child, I think. Pinwheel drops one of 3 masks: mask of the mother, father, and child. That each boost 1 stat, and you can buy the other 2 masks later. But that again, I didn't get the one of the good masks. And Pinwheel's not a very hard boss, but after Pinwheel, I was dropped into a part of the catacombs where there's an undead blacksmith, and sort of the edge of the Giant's Tomb. I did not get very far in Giant's Tomb. Again, this is before I finished Blighttown, but I did have to check YouTube guides multiple times to figure out how to safely leave the catacombs and get back to the Firelight Shrine. But by the time I got back, I had some okay equipment, and I found the Great Scythe, which became sort of my main weapon in the second half of the game. So it wasn't all bad, but sometimes getting back to safety after you find a different safety is harder than actually making progress.
Oh yeah, definitely relatable. I had a similar moment where in Blighttown, there you can go down a massive hollow tree and end up at Ash Lake, which we did mention
no,
earlier.
I wouldn't even know how to get back up the tree. I didn't do that part of the game until I had already unlocked fast travel.
Yeah, and the tree is just it's a long way down, and there are mushroom men there that for some reason punch like an absolute truck.
Yeah, no, there's giant mushroom golems, and there's
Yeah.
basilisks that can curse you, and curse is an instant kill status effect. If you're in the cursed gas for too long, you guys know all this. I'm doing this in case there's a listener that doesn't remember or doesn't know. But that makes sense. How that could also be an extremely dark trip back. But fortunately I already had fast travel by the time I tried that part, because you can't even get down the tree unless you like find a hidden room in around the Blighttown swamp and then attack a wall like behind a treasure chest or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find that one.
Yeah, that was definitely like I remember I rested at Ash Lake, and then I was like, okay, I need to get back. So I was like, I think like 50% of the way through, and then I died, and then I respawned back at Ash Lake. I'm like, oh god, what have we done? So yeah, that was definitely a trying moment during my first playthrough.
Yeah, like after one or two attempts from my trip down to the catacombs, or at like sort of the edge of the Giant's Tomb on the way back, like I realized very soon I'm gonna need help for this, because this is this is a problem where I am now. But like skipping around a little bit, the Anor Londo, that area after Sen's Fortress, really is, I think, my favorite part of the game. I mean, you can make some comparisons between From Souls games and Castlevania games, where it's non-linear exploration with an interconnected setting. Like, this was the part of the game was like, oh, I am just trying to get through this castle and get to whatever's at the top. And it's just a beautiful, cool castle full of hostile knights. There's one enemy at the castle that's sort of notorious, but it accidentally killed itself the first time I attempted them. There's two archers that shoot arrows at you up a narrow corridor, or maybe it's a buttress, maybe it's more like a staircase. And I heard so many stories of getting knocked off of the wall by the archers and falling to your death, that I was really worried. I just had my shield up the whole time. But the when I finally got to the archers, one of them sort of took an awkward step and killed itself on my very first attempt. So that was the only time I impressively killed something on the first attempt in the entire first half of Dark Souls. Like once I got slightly over leveled and strong enough, I did do well against bosses. But I had a lot of anxiety about those archers. But one of them killed itself, so it wasn't as bad for me. Didn't you guys remember struggling against those archers?
Oh yeah, actually that's the one I was thinking of when you guys were talking about like cliffs, like having to scale cliffs. Like that part with the two arches is like, it's the only, I think it's the only part where like I had to put the game down for a bit, because like, I just wasn't getting through even on this like second playthrough. So yeah, it's bullshit. It's total bullshit.
Sollosi, did you enjoy the rafters section as well? I think right before the archers, where you have to delicately walk around beams.
Yes, there's there's the giant chapel area that has the painting you jump into. That it's very easy to fall to your death there. I remember what you're talking about, but I for me the bigger struggle at Anor Londo was the boss at the end, and we'll talk about them very soon. But I thought Anor Londo was maybe my favorite part of the game because it was like really just sort of getting your timing right against these very strong silver knights and then a couple giant knights, and and there's hidden passages and at least two other settings, two other zones that sort of are from offshoots of the of Anor Londo. There's the Duke's Archives, and then the what is it, the Painted World the snow area that you jump into a painting to reach. I got stuck in that one too. I used the bonfire in the Painted World, and you can't escape the paint. But then I attacked the boss the first time because you can walk by the boss to leave, but if you attack them, then she'll always be hostile when you join. So probably too early in the game, I challenged that part of the game, that zone, and the boss is invisible. You have to watch her footprints in the snow to attack, and she can inflict the bleed status very easily because she has a giant bleeding scythe. So I had a scythe versus scythe duel for her that went on for a few too many attempts for my liking before I got out of there. But it's yeah, like that whole area of the game, Anor Londo, is my favorite part. It was, and I felt like it was when I really got good at sort of like shield switching and two-handing versus one-handing and parry timing and sort of determining my play style for the rest of the game is where I mastered it. Was in Anor Londo.
Yeah, there's also an interesting thing. So if there's a guy called Knight Lautrec who is in the Undead Burg. I think it's after the Gargoyles, and he's like in a prison cell. And if you unlock the prison cell for him, then he'll come to Firelink Shrine. But eventually, when you come back to the shrine, he'll be gone, and then the Firekeeper will be dead.
Yeah. The Firekeeper is a mute girl that's underneath the bonfire at Firelink Shrine, and Lautrec shows up there whether you unlock the cell for him or not.
Oh, okay.
But I think he gives you an item if you if you set him free. Otherwise, he sets himself free. But yeah, let's continue with Lautrec and Anor Londo.
Yeah, so he's gone. The Firekeeper is dead, and then there's this item called the Black Eye Orb. And so then when you get to Anor Londo, you'll get like a message that says like the Black Eye Orb is like glowing or something like that. And so then if you it'll basically summon you, and you'll be invading Lautrec. And it's like him, and then he has two like allies. So you have to like fight against all three of them. And then if you win, then you get the Firekeeper soul back, and then you can give it back to the Firekeeper to bring her back to life, and then bring the bonfire and from Firelink Shrine back to life. Or you can keep it and use it to upgrade your flask if you want to. But then you're giving up the Firelink Shrine bonfire for the rest of the game.
Oh, I have some thoughts about Firekeeper souls, because you find a couple throughout the game, and you can use them like guilt free to upgrade your flask and how much it heals. I think the max flask is +7, but I want to save what happened to the other Firekeepers for the second half of the episode. I mean, the one last thing I want to talk about, the boss at the end of Anor Londo are because again, Anor Londo was the sort of kingdom of the gods. So Gwyn, the Sun King Gwyn and his children. There's Guinevere and Gwendolyn, and a third one that shows up in a different game. But the boss at the end of Anor Londo are Ornstein and Smaug, who were two of the sort of knight retainers of King Gwyn. And they're famously one of the most challenging fights in the game. They're certainly above average challenge for that part of the game. Ornstein uses a lightning spear, and he's very fast and agile. Smaug is a very, very chunky knight with a giant hammer, and they sort of cover for each other, and you can hide behind pillars to avoid them, but Smaug can smash through the pillars with his hammer. Being very, very careful and attacking when you have an opening and is super important when you fight them. And once you defeat one of them, the second one absorbs the power of the first one and heals his HP bar to full. So you'll either fight a lightning charged Smaug or a giant size Ornstein for the second half of that fight. And it took me several attempts. Like by the time I got to them and lost the first time, I re-explored more of Anor Londo. I found more hidden corridors and more hidden paths. So the path to get back to Ornstein and Smaug was pretty fast by the time I sort of unlocked a bunch of doors in Anor Londo and figured it out. But it took me several attempts. It's a great fight. It's, to me, one of the definitive fights of the game. And I mean, the rest of Dark Souls is good, but I think that's when I was enjoying Dark Souls the most, exploring Anor Londo and then challenging Ornstein and Smaug. Anyone else have a similar reaction or at least a similar struggle? Please don't tell me I'm the only one that had a tough time.
I mean, for sure. Like Ornstein and Smough, it's definitely probably the most iconic fight in Dark Souls 1 and one of the most iconic fights in all of From Software's catalog. But I think it's also like it's weird how it's like I think it's like the first 2v1 boss battle that you really see in like modern Souls, and like relative, or at least I think it's like also probably the only one of the handful of examples where From Software actually gets a 2v1 boss fight right. And it's funny how it's also like the first one where like Ornstein and Smough, like they do cover for each other, but they also like have gaps, sufficient enough gaps in their attack cycles for players to get in and like punish them. Maybe not a lot, maybe just only 1 or 2 hits, but they do leave sufficient openings for you to get in hits and not have to like dodge for like 3 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Ornstein and Smough is just fantastic. It's probably the best boss fight in Dark Souls by a pretty decent margin.
I would say that maybe 1 or 2 of the fights in the DLC for Dark Souls are as good, but it's awesome. Like it was challenging, but I felt like I was learning every time I lost. I sort of figured them out the more I fought them. It's everything I want in a video game boss. It's like an amazing level, amazing boss. It's not bad or disappointing, but it is sort of true that the second half of Dark Souls isn't as good as Anor Londo and Ornstein and Smaugh. But yeah, that's the first half of Dark Souls. A very messy, indirect ramble about the first half of Dark Souls. In the next episode, I really want to get into the story implications of some of these bosses, because we could talk about maybe not Ornstein and Smaugh, but like bosses like Sif and Gwyndolin and oh boy, and maybe even Quelaag some more, and the Bed of Chaos. Maybe the less we talk about that one, the better. Like there's super fascinating story implications for what these bosses are, but it's not really clear when you're going through the game, because there's not a lot of dialogue, and you learn more about bosses when you defeat them, gain their soul items, forge an item from their soul, and then read the description of their item. So usually you don't understand what you're doing or what you just fought until after you kill it and do more researching and exploring. But on that note, we will use the second podcast to do more story discussion and also talk about the second half of the game. But I mean, I've already finished Dark Souls 1. I finished it like 2 weeks earlier than I thought I would, because I just couldn't stop playing it. I had such a good time. But I want to get into the second half of the game and more lore discussion and the DLC in the next episode, because we still have a lot to talk about. But there are entire YouTube documentaries and podcast series dedicated to just the lore of FromSoft games. So we'll never be able to totally do these games justice over 2 episodes. But I just wanted to make a sincere attempt, because I'm so glad I finally played this game. But oh boy, before we go into housekeeping, fellas, if I've played Dark Souls 1, Demon Souls, and Bloodborne, which one should I play next? Go. Short answer version.
Might as well go into Dark Souls 3.
Skipping 2 into 3, okay?
I don't recommend skipping 2. I do like. I think 2 is very much worth playing. It's actually a game that I enjoy quite a bit, and I think has some worthwhile ideas. But I think it's maybe best saved for later on. And the thing about 3 is it's the lore is directly building off of Dark Souls 1. So it's really interesting going to 3, and there's a lot of like kind of repetition of like characters and certain ideas in terms of lore, but there's also like a lot of building off of the lore Dark Souls established. And on that note, like a lot of what it does is like really rewarding in that way. So while the lore of Dark Souls is fresh in your head, I think a playthrough of 3 could be really interesting.
Cool. Any other thoughts here before we move on?
I think. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. I was
No,
gonna
go
say
ahead.
I would suggest 2, Dark Souls 2, because 3 still kind of builds on 2, like lore wise. Like there's still like a bunch of references to 2 and 3, and it's just gonna be hard to go back to 2 after 3. And it's a nice it's nice to see how how the Dark Souls 2 team kind of takes a different tack on some of the mechanics in 1. So I would really recommend it before 3.
I agree with that. I think you should play 2. I was just jumping in to say don't play Scholar of the First Sin. You should play the original version of 2.
Oh, yeah.
I think the one I have is Scholar of the First Sin, sadly.
Oh, yeah. So with Scholar of the First Sin, they like went back and changed a lot of the enemy placements and added more enemies to sections, and it just really
good.
hurts the pace of the game, and it's not really the best version. The original version is really the best version to play.
Yeah, I would say Dark Souls 2 is it's a nice place to go. It is very different, but it still does play like a Souls game, even though I'd say the controls are much muddier than Dark Souls 1 even. And it does introduce some ideas that I think maybe Elden Ring builds off of, but I think are also in Dark Souls 3 a little bit. And even if the base game is kind of meh, because it did go through quite a rough development, I think the DLCs are all pretty good for the most part. Some enemy placement aside, but the DLCs in general I think are all pretty good and worth checking out as well. So I would recommend 2 for sure.
All right, so that's 3 votes for 2 and 1 vote for 3. I think I'm just gonna go and check prices on Sekiro. That sounds right, like the move right now.
Sekiro's never a bad call.
Yeah.
But listeners, one other thing that's never a bad call is listening to more RPG Fan podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us for an hour 15 plus on this episode. Coming next week, unsurprisingly, we have another Dark Souls podcast where we will get into the second half of the game and maybe get into some more story and some more boss fights. But we already have most of August planned out. We're doing one episode on ranking Final Fantasy games, but maybe in a slightly unusual way that I think will get some people fired up in the comment sections. We're also doing an episode revisiting Undertale, a game that Aleks finished quite high on our PS4 ranking list that we did a few weeks ago.
I mean, yeah, looking forward to talking about Undertale. It's going to be a good time. Love that game.
But after those 2 episodes, we're doing 2 episodes on the game I've been playing the most the last few weeks, Dragon Age Inquisition. It's the third and final part of our Dragon Age revisitation that we started last year. And again, I'm only maybe a dozen or so hours in, but I am having a blast with Dragon Age 3. It's a real good time, and in a few weeks, those will be a few real good podcasts. But listeners, if you want to reach out to us as a podcast, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find RPG Fan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, or our website proper, rpgfan.com. We also have an associated Discord. But the best way to support us, maybe the most directly, is to buy from the RPG Fan shop. If you go to rpgfan.com/shop, you will find 2 storefronts, one hosted by TeePublic, where you can get things like apparel, coffee mugs, phone accessories, etc., and another page hosted by Hyperplay RPG, where you can buy the RPG Fan Review Collection, a tome that's about 300 pages worth of one single page RPG Fan reviews, with several people on this podcast represented in those pages. So if you don't want to spend any money, you can always listen to more podcasts. Retro Encounter is but one of 3 podcasts hosted by RPG Fan. There's also Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness and what games we're playing, and Rhythm Encounter every other 2 weeks about RPG music. You can review Retro, Rhythm, or Random Encounters on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you choose to listen. We appreciate any feedback you're willing to provide. But if you want to give us feedback as individuals and not as podcasts or websites, let's tell the listeners how they can find us, the panelists, starting with you, Aleks.
You can just email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
Now, Gio.
Yeah, you can find me on Discord. I'm 10bstar. And you can also email me at geo@rpgfan.com.
Now, Dom.
You can find me on Discord and at me as @dhcanny.
And then lastly, Ben.
Hi, you can find me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
And listeners, you've probably heard me say this upwards of 300 times. You can find me pretty easily online. I am at Evoker for Dogs, either on Blue Sky, Instagram, or RPG Fans Discord. So, going into Dark Souls, I knew a lot just by reputation, and they all told me go up instead of down, and I still managed to find a way to get stuck in the catacombs. But I made it through the other side, and I could not be happier, and I'm looking forward to next week. Thank you, good night, and good luck.